Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan, Miami Book Fair, and all of us at Books and Books in Miami, Florida, I welcome you to a virtual evening with Katherine Schwarzenegger Pratt to celebrate the paperback edition of her wonderful book, The Gift of Forgiveness, inspiring stories from those who have overcome the unforgivable, a perfect blend of personal insights and hard-won wisdom for those seeking a way to live with greater acceptance, grace, and peace. Katherine Schwarzenegger Pratt is a mother, wife, daughter, sister, animal activist, and New York Times bestselling author. As a passionate animal advocate, Katherine works as an ambassador for Best Friends Animal Society and the ASPCA, lending her time, voice, and energy to spread awareness about animal rescue. As an author, Katherine has skillfully translated her own personal experiences into all 4 of her books that speak to her generation. In 2021, Katherine launched the weekly Instagram live series Before, During, and After, BDA Baby, in which she discusses a variety of topics surrounding pregnancy, fertility, motherhood, and more with notable guests and experts. To moderate tonight's conversation, we're joined by Jamie Kern Lima. Jamie is a self-made entrepreneur, champion of women, philanthropist, and founder of It Cosmetics, a company she started in her living room and sold to L'Oreal for $1.2 billion, becoming the first female CEO in L'Oreal's 100-plus year history. She's on the Forbes Richest Self-Made Women's list and is an active investor in more than 15 companies. Jamie is also the author of the New York Times bestseller, Believe It, How to Go from Underestimated to Unstoppable, published by Simon & Schuster. To viewers everywhere, you're in for a treat. We thank you for your support and the generous donations that help keep independent bookstores like ours in business during these challenging times. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the virtual stage. Welcome.
Hello.
Hello, Katherine.
Hi.
We are going to have fun. I am so excited. So many people are so excited to just be part of this conversation with you. And I just first want to say congratulations on so many things in your life. But today, of course, we're honoring the gift of forgiveness and coming out in paperback, brand new. And I just want to share with you that in preparation for this, I have been reading the thousands of reviews and literally like sobbing my eyes out over the impact your work and a lot of the stories you've included have had in so many people. So I just want to first say hello and can you share with us, how this feels to have such a special moment for your book coming out in paperback and just everything that's happened in the past year with it?
Yeah, I mean, as we were talking about before, it's definitely been a crazy year. I launched the hardcover version of this book a year ago, and it was just days before the pandemic hit, and we all went into lockdown. So it's been a very interesting year for the book and just talking about this topic, and to have it come out a year later in paperback is really exciting for me, and really great to be able to continue to just talk about such an important topic and to spread awareness about the importance of this incredibly beautiful yet incredibly complicated topic that is something that we all will come face to face with at some point in our lives. So it's a topic that I'm really passionate about, and I'm so excited and honored that you took the time to have this conversation with me. And I know that your book has also just come out, and so it's such an exciting time for you as well. So I know that a lot has changed in the past year for so many people, and especially in the book world has changed dramatically. And the topic for me of forgiveness continues to be incredibly important, and a topic that I have found, especially in the past year, and given the situation of the past year, has finally been something that people are actually allowing themselves to focus on for the first time in a lot of their lives. And I think that that's why the book was, able to touch so many people's lives, is really because forgiveness is one of those topics that we kind of go through our lives saying we'll get to it later. And because our lives are so fast paced, we don't really ever get to it. But because this past year has required a lot of us to sit at home and focus on things that we wouldn't necessarily have ever given ourselves the time to focus on, forgiveness definitely fell under that category. And so I've heard a lot of really great stories about just forgiveness experiences and journeys and explorations, and I'm excited to continue them a year later.
What a year. Yeah, on so many levels. And, when I think about forgiveness, to your point, like our whole lives, I think it's something that impacts or definitely is relevant to every single human being. And I love so much the 22 stories you share, and just how, someone can have such a different life experience, but when you hear it through their words and their journey of forgiveness, it's like I had so many aha moments with your book where I realized, oh, wow, like I've thought I've forgiven my husband for this, but really when I bring it up every time, I'm like, oh, how he actually handles the situation might be different if I completely forgive it. There's just the power of story and the power of the stories you've chosen to share, and then your own experiences woven through. Just want to say, as someone who has had the gift of reading your book already, I just want to say thank you for that. And the one thing I want to ask you is, your big show, BDA Baby, before, during, after baby, has been so amazing for so many parents out there. But what I want to ask you on the topic of forgiveness is BDA. Like, what is your experience with forgiveness before you wrote the book, and then during this journey of just so many people vulnerably and candidly sharing their experiences with you, and then now after, right? Because now your book baby is out in the world, and now I'm sure you hear more people's stories than ever. So BDA on your journey with forgiveness in terms of the book.
First of all, I just really appreciated and loved that natural integration of BDA into that question. So thank you for that. So I didn't really pay attention to what forgiveness meant to me in my life until I really found myself in my early 20s, just really struggling with forgiveness. I didn't know how to practice it. I didn't know what it meant to me. I didn't know what the role it played in my life at all. I just knew that I felt like I was really struggling with it. And so it wasn't really until then that I did a quick inventory of, okay, how has forgiveness played a part in my life or not played a part in my life up until now? And how can I better understand the role that I want it to play, and also what parts of it I want to get better at or just better understand for myself. And I started talking to people about the topic of forgiveness just in conversation. And I found that forgiveness is a really heavy and intense topic, and not one that you necessarily expect to be asked about at a dinner table conversation, but it ends up presenting such incredible stories when you do ask somebody about their forgiveness experiences. And I really found that when I talked to people, whether I have known them for a really long time or just met them, when I would talk to them about the journey of forgiveness, their experiences and their stories always left me thinking, and also just showed me further understandings of forgiveness and how, complicated the topic is, and how each and every single one of us have such different relationships with the subject of forgiveness. And it made me want to not only talk to more people about it and apply their learnings and their findings to my own life and my own situation, but it made me want to write a book about it, because I found that hearing other people's experiences and struggles with forgiveness helped me in my journey with forgiveness. And I wanted to be able to create that in a book, and to have a really wide variety and a wide range of people's experiences and journeys, and some people who had, given themselves the gift of forgiveness, other people who were on the receiving end of that gift, some people still struggling with it. Some people have it down, like a well-oiled machine of how to practice it and how to move forward. Other people, it's a lifelong journey. And I think it just really speaks to how complicated the topic is. And every single person just talked so much about how when you are able to actually practice forgiveness, that the feeling of freedom is felt, and that forgiveness is a gift that you give yourself, and it really doesn't have anything to do with another person. So when I was able to understand that and continue to be able to hear people's stories, even, a year later after my book has come out, I just continue to learn so much more about the topic of forgiveness and my own relationship with it. And I also always love to constantly reiterate to people that while I, spent years writing this book, and while I had this book come out a year ago, that I am not an expert on forgiveness by any means. I am a student of forgiveness, and that I've struggled with forgiveness in my life. I've been able to practice it. And I also know that I'll be able to, have moments in my future where I will struggle with it. And so I still love to hear people's experiences and journeys with it, to continue my growth around the subject of forgiveness and to continue my understanding of it. And I just am so fascinated by the topic. So those are the various phases of my forgiveness journey.
Yeah, that's so great. I think that, the most common thing, just even thinking through, I have 5 families, a blended family, adoption, all kinds of stuff, but just thinking through how forgiveness has been thought of, I guess, in my family. And I think this is pretty common after reading your book. A lot of times people feel like, well, if I forgive someone for this, it means I'm making it okay. And
Yeah,
right. And there's kind of this relationship with it where they feel like they're almost making it okay if something was an injustice or a betrayal, but that's really kind of not the right way to see it, right? Because it keeps you almost in your own, it's really just hurting you. Can you talk about that, about just that common thread of how people see forgiveness sometimes when they have been through such pain, and just how freeing it can become for them, how it's not them saying it was right what happened, but what is that process of almost shifting your mindset around it, and then how it's really becomes a gift for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, forgiveness is one of those topics that I think a lot of us have very complicated and challenging relationships with, because we go through our lives feeling like forgiveness is something that I'm giving to another person. So why would I want to give someone who caused me pain, hurt, heartbreak, betrayal, devastation? Why would I want to be giving them anything, let alone a gift of forgiveness? And so, that's an understandable mindset and mentality that I think a lot of us have grown up thinking and viewing the act of forgiveness. So I felt that way. I know a ton of people feel that way. And then on top of it, you feel like if I choose to forgive someone, which for some people, you think of forgiveness as making something seem like it was okay, what happened. And I think, of course, I'm not saying that at all, 100%. Like, I don't think that forgiveness is saying what happened to you is okay, or what someone did to you is okay, or what happened in your life is okay by practicing forgiveness. I think the biggest shift was understanding that forgiveness is a gift that you're giving yourself. And forgiveness is really saying that you are aware of what happened to you, and you so don't want to be attached to that pain and that hurt anymore, that you want to use, a knife or scissors to cut yourself from being tied to whatever hurt you're dragging around with you every single day. And you look at that as being so wrong that you don't want to bring that with you into your future. And so that's what I look at forgiveness as being, is really being the act of taking bolt cutters and cutting yourself from that incident, pain, feeling, hurt, sadness, whatever that is for you. And that is really forgiveness, because you're freeing yourself from that. But, there is a huge amount of people, and I felt this way as well, where you think of forgiveness and you say, if I'm going to forgive someone, or if I'm going to practice forgiveness, that feels like a betrayal of my own hurt, that I'm, betraying this pain that I have carried around with me for, some people carry it around with them their whole lives. And if you say, oh, I'm going to forgive and I'm going to let that go, then what happens to that pain that you've identified with and has been part of you for your whole life, or for 5 years, or for 10 years, or 15, or however long? what happens to that? Does it just go away? And that a lot of us feel like if it goes away, then we're betraying all of that pain that we've experienced. So I say all of that to say that I understand those feelings, and I think they're totally normal and natural. And for me, the most empowering part of this forgiveness journey was understanding that we all have our own ways of practicing or not practicing forgiveness. There's not, a right way, and there's not a wrong way to practice forgiveness. There is only your way. And what forgiveness looks like to you is something completely different than what it looks like to me. And how you practice it is different than how I practice it. And that's okay. It's all part of figuring out what works for us, and how we want to have the topic of forgiveness be a part of our lives or not.
That's so powerful. The bolt cutters.
Yeah.
The bolt cutters. There's a famous quote that says something along the lines of, when we carry all this resentment, it's kind of like us drinking poison, expecting it to hurt the other person who hurt us or whatever, right? And I think this idea of forgiveness, actually just freeing ourselves, is, and this I think was kind of a through line in some of the stories in your book as well, with in the words of people sharing their own forgiveness stories, saying that they didn't want the person who had wronged them to continue hurting them. And by them not forgiving, kind of to your point, it was like they were just continuing to let that person be part of their life, or let that pain be part of their life. And to be able to forgive is to kind of not about that other person, but just to break free from it. I think that's such a powerful mindset shift, because so many people just still hold on to it, thinking that it's saying it's okay if they forgive, right? That's not what you're doing at all.
Yeah. A lot of us, of course, feel that way. And I actually really, I heard this, the idea of using bolt cutters to free yourself as a way of, understanding or visualizing forgiveness in an action, from Nadia Bowles-Weber, who's in my book. And she did a video on forgiveness, and she's a pastor, and she talked about, in her section, about addiction and a relationship that she had, and forgiveness in that way, and being given the gift of forgiveness herself as well. And when I watched her video on forgiveness, and it allowed me to visualize what the act of forgiveness really was for me and what it could be for me. And I got so much more excited, and I felt so much more empowered by this idea of what forgiveness, the role that forgiveness could play in my life, and also just practicing it. Because, so many of us grow up with this understanding of forgiveness as being something where, you need to sit in a room with another person, hash it out. Someone needs to ask for forgiveness, and then you give them, you say, I forgive you. And, that's how it works. But really understanding that you don't need to have that happen. You don't need to have a meeting between two people or other, different parties. You really can just wake up one day and say, I actually don't want to carry around this, this sadness or this pain anymore. I want to forgive, and I want to release that, and I want to let it go. And also to know that if you have trigger moments or trigger days that set you back to feeling angry or upset, that doesn't mean that you are terrible at forgiveness. That just means that you still have the ability to be triggered by something. And it's all about being gentle with yourself in those moments, and then working your way back to a place of forgiveness.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And I love when you talk about that in your book too, because sometimes when we think, okay, I've forgiven, or it could be really, I've done anything in life, and then we regress for a minute. We're like, oh, I failed at it. Or, right? It's easy to think we did it wrong. But you're saying, give yourself grace in that journey. And also, can you share, because I know you mentioned a little bit about that you aren't saying to forget, that forgetting is different than forgiving. And can you talk about just how you navigate between the two of those things, and how you don't let not forgetting turn into resentment or something like that,
Yeah. I mean, I think we all have heard this idea of forgive and forget. And it, for me at least, is impossible. I don't think that I've always thought of this idea of forgiving and forgetting as like, how could you possibly just delete something from your mind or from your existence, or just, in order to forgive, do you have to forget? Is that how that works? And if you have to forget something, I definitely couldn't do that because I remember things. And, especially if something has been emotional for you, your body remembers it. And so I was really, I think it made me nervous to think of this idea of having to forget something in order to practice forgiveness. And as I did my research for this book, I realized that you actually don't need to forget something in order to practice forgiveness. You can forgive and not forget, and that is still considered forgiveness for you. So hearing that to me was a huge relief in my relationship and in my understanding of forgiveness. And it also, I think, gives other people some sense of relief to know that you don't have to necessarily forgive. You don't have to necessarily forget what someone did to you or what happened to you or a feeling or an emotion. You can remember it forever, and you most likely will, but you can still choose to not have it dictate your life and your day every single day moving forward. You can choose to say, I'm going to remember what happened, but I'm also going to move on from it. And I don't want it to be a part of my day-to-day life or my future. So there are a lot of examples in this book of people choosing to do that. And also people choosing to take what happened to them or happened in their lives and to use it as fuel to make a difference in the world or to change something that they experience they don't want to have happen to another person. So it's really taken a lot of situations in people's lives and use that to make the world a better place, make their community better places, make a difference in the world, and to not forget what happened to them, but to still be able to practice forgiveness.
That's so good. Just thinking of the audience, and we have some audience questions submitted and everything else. And but I know, with everyone in general, everyone's in different phases of forgiveness at any moment. And, talking about BDA again, some are just figuring out where do I start? And some are right in the middle of it, and some are healing from it and moving on. But just for that really kind of, I guess, big picture question, if someone's listening to us right now, part of this conversation with us tonight, first, thank you. You're part of this conversation with us. And if you're just going to get Katherine's book for the first time because you're part of this event, because I know everyone's getting the book who's part of this event, I'm so excited for you because it's really good. But for anyone just, kind of going, okay, where do I begin? Like, how do I forgive? How do I forgive? What would you say to them?
I would say, first of all, you're already taking a huge step by being interested in being open to forgiveness. If you're listening to this conversation, if you've picked up the book, if you want to even say to yourself, what does forgiveness mean to me in my life? What is forgiveness? That already right there is a great first step in your journey to forgiveness and in your journey to getting a better understanding of what forgiveness means to you. Because as I was saying earlier, it's not a topic that we talk to each other about. It's not a beautiful, fancy, glamorous, fun topic to talk about. It's really painful and challenging for so many of us. So if you're open to forgiveness and you're open to welcoming it into your life and giving yourself that gift, that right there is a huge first step already. And then I would just say that unfortunately forgiveness is one of those topics and one of those experiences that doesn't have a quick step or quick guide to how to forgive. And a lot of us have heard of this idea of hurry up and forgive and just move forward in your life. And obviously that's much easier said than done, because if it was that easy, then we wouldn't be, having a conversation about it right now or writing books about it. But it is a topic that, I think so many of us struggle with, and it's a topic that, you really want to take time to explore what it means to you in your life and how you might want to practice it, and getting a better understanding by reading the stories that are in this book, talking to people about their relationships with forgiveness. And then really, for me at least, making this shift in my mind of what forgiveness really is, which is, as I said before, a gift that I'm giving myself. It's not about another person. It has nothing to do with any other party. It's really just a gift of freedom that I'm giving strictly to myself. If you end up having somebody come to you and ask for forgiveness, or have a moment with another person that the words "I forgive you" are spoken, and that's a beautiful sprinkles on top of a beautiful cake, but it's not the whole base of the cake. And it really is about you making the decision and feeling empowered enough to make a change in your life and to decide that you no longer want to carry around pains from your past and that you want to free yourself from that. So I think just being open to forgiveness is like the first and most important act of someone's forgiveness journey. And then how they choose to welcome it into their lives is really up to them.
I think it's so powerful what you share in the book and then also live here about, because a lot of people think like, oh, this thing happened to me, this person did this to me, and they haven't forgiven them yet. And they have that idea, like you mentioned, that in order to do it, there needs to be a sit down or a whole thing where that person even needs to be part of it at all. And I think that it's so empowering to talk about this idea that, well, you may choose, and like you said, it's different for everyone, but you may choose, you don't want to give that person any more of your energy. And maybe it's not a person you ever want to be around again, but maybe just for yourself, you go on your own journey, right? Of learning to forgive so that you give yourself that gift so that you break free from that. And I think that's huge, because I think a lot of people we have ideas of things and then we let them of keep us stuck somewhere, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are it's a good grouping of people in my book, and it was important to me that that every single person in this book had not only a different story and a different experience, but also had a very different and unique relationship with forgiveness. Because in those 22 stories, everyone practiced or struggled with forgiveness in different ways. And that to me was really important to have in this book, because it spoke to the complexities of the topic of forgiveness and how challenging it is and how painful it can be, and how complicated of a topic and a journey and an experience it really is. And it's why I, put together such a wide variety of people and of stories, because I wanted someone to read this book and to say, oh, this one person's story I can relate to, or that person's journey or struggle with forgiveness resonates with me, and it's empowering me to go out and practice forgiveness in my own life, or to want to do something differently. And I also, it's also really important to me that when people read this book, that there are stories in this book that are, people overcoming and forgiving the unforgivable, what most of us would consider to be the unforgivable. And I always like to remind people that I didn't put together this group of people for anyone to feel like they're comparing their pain or their hurt or their heartbreak, that everyone's heartbreak and pain and sadness is valid and it's real, and you should give yourself 100% of validation that what you're feeling is 100% real and okay. I put this together to inspire people, to empower people to welcome forgiveness into their lives based on other people's journeys and experiences, but to never get into a place where you're comparing someone's hurt with another person's hurt or another person's pain or heartbreak, because everyone has pain and heartbreak and on different levels. And the stories in this book, my hope is that they will inspire you to say, oh, she was able to practice forgiveness. I can also practice it, and I can also welcome it into my life at my own time and my own pace.
That's so good. And also, I think just this idea that you also touch on that I think is so important, because a lot of people don't realize, but that we can also be on a journey of forgiving ourselves, right?
Totally,
a lot of times people make past mistakes, and then all of a sudden we carry that maybe label we gave ourselves, or that regrettable incident we miscalculated one time, and we played that over and over, and we let it almost like, kind of we're attached to that. And so can you share a little bit about that too? Because we might have people with us right now that are like, well, you know what, I just need to forgive myself. Like, right? A lot of times we're our own worst critic, or and we've all made mistakes, but learning how to let go of those and move past them is also such a gift of freedom.
Yeah. I mean, self-forgiveness is, I think so many people will say this, and I'll say it as well, is that self-forgiveness is oftentimes the most challenging form of forgiveness, because as you were saying, we are our own worst critic, and we're very hard on ourselves. And that is what makes self-forgiveness so incredibly challenging and complicated as well. And this book really has a lot of stories and situations of self-forgiveness being practiced and people's journeys with self-forgiveness. And that is, for a lot of people, an ongoing one and a lifelong journey to, to be able to forgive oneself and to be able to really practice that and be gentle with yourself in that journey is super important. And you'll see in this book, if you read throughout all the different stories, and also on the podcast that I did on forgiveness, just the wide variety of people experiencing self-forgiveness and exploring that part of their life, because it is a really challenging part of the forgiveness journey that sometimes you don't even expect to go down the self-forgiveness path, but you end up doing that to get to freeing yourself from a different situation. So it is a big theme in this book, the journey of self-forgiveness, and it is an incredibly challenging one as well.
Yeah. So just like your mama is a kick-ass woman.
Yes,
Makes a big impact on the world. And now you have a daughter. And so, I was curious, because a lot of us have, parents we love, and, we kind of learn about all things from, including forgiveness. And then I'm curious, how has it been from learning about it from your mom, and now maybe you guys are relearning it together, I'm not sure. And then also kind of like that generational thing, right? Because a lot of us are on that path of going, wow, do I want to do this a little differently than I was taught? And now in your case, how are you going to talk to your sweet daughter about forgiveness? And has that changed through generations and through this experience with the book?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I have changed my understanding of forgiveness just based on my experience doing this book and having conversations like this one, and hearing more people's experiences and journeys with forgiveness. And my mom and my dad taught us about various life lessons throughout our entire lives. And I think, for me, when it came to the topic of forgiveness, I think we learned about forgiveness when we're really little, and it's so simple. It's so easy. It's, you fall down at the playground, you're not invited to a play date, and, you have your feelings hurt, and you go say sorry, and you hug and make up, and everything's totally fine. And then as you get older, obviously things become more complicated and more serious, and, emotions get involved, and different things happen, and forgiveness becomes much more challenging and much more complicated. And you start identifying with, what is the role that forgiveness has in your life. It's not as easy as going to the playground and saying you're sorry, and both parties say they're sorry, and you hug and make up, and everything's fine. So it does take a moment, sometimes after not talking about what forgiveness might mean, or having a situation where forgiveness isn't even an option, to talk about forgiveness again. And so I don't think that I really talked about what forgiveness was very much when I was in high school or when I was in college. And it wasn't really until I had a really big falling out with my childhood best friend that was a devastating thing for me, that I really felt like, okay, I'm not able to forgive. And what is forgiveness for me? How do I even do that? How is it even, possible for me? Like, what does that mean? And so I have two incredible parents that have, taught me everything I could possibly imagine, and continue to teach me everything as I've gotten older and I've become a parent myself. I think when it comes to how I will talk about the topic of forgiveness with my daughter, is that I will just have it be a topic that we talk about and that we check in about, and also understand that it will change as you get older and as life experiences happen. Your relationship with forgiveness will evolve, and it will grow, and it will become more challenging, and it will, maybe have moments where you're shut off to it, and then you'll have moments where you want to welcome it into your life, and that's okay. That's part of the journey of forgiveness. And also, talk openly about how every single person really has such a different way of practicing it. And that to me is a daunting part of forgiveness, but also a really exciting part of it, because you can choose to do whatever you want with the topic and practice it however you want to and struggle with it however you want to. And there are also people that I think are in all of our lives who we look at and say, you know, what would their life have looked like if they were able to forgive? How would their lives be different? How would they be different as people? And so looking at situations like that, I think are important to just keep the conversation going and open, and in a household, and also just with children as they get older. And I also know that my daughter is 8 months old, so I'm going to definitely learn as I go.
It's funny when I always thought I understood things like mom guilt and all these things.
Yeah.
And when I became a parent, I was like, oh, I understood it in my head, but now I really understand it. And it's like another one of a million things I have to practice forgiveness on with myself all the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have some audience questions that I'm excited to ask you as well. And I just want to say, you know, in prepping for this awesome conversation, I read in Oprah Daily that you had shared with them about the gift of forgiveness. They asked if you would ever team up with your mom on something. And you're like, I would love to. I do everything with her. And it's the first thing that came to my mind is, and listen, gift of forgiveness is out now. This is going to be out. And not that you need anything more on your plate, but one day, if you did like a 3-generation, your mom, your daughter, or your mom and you, on gift of forgiveness from different generational perspectives, I think it's so powerful what you're doing. It is so profound, the impact. I literally was crying reading the reviews, because when we share our stories and when you frame it so nicely, and I don't know how you curated the stories that you did, but they're just so wonderful. It's just such a topic that, to your point, so few people talk about, but it's part of all of our lives. So I just want to say thank you for this, and on behalf of everyone.
Oh, thank you so much. That's so sweet. Yeah, I think that even in this book, I mean, it would be amazing to do anything with my mom. And I think in this book, you see there is a wide variety of age groups and different backgrounds, different, you know, genders, races, upbringings, ethnicities, just to be able to see, you know, how different forgiveness is for all different phases of life, of backgrounds, of upbringings, and, you know, how faith plays into some people's relationship with forgiveness. Some people don't have faith as being a part of their journey at all. And you really see that in the stories in this book. And that was also important to me, to be able to have, you know, someone like Polly Shepherd, who was in the Charleston church shooting, and to be able to hear her understanding of forgiveness, and then to talk to somebody like Elizabeth Smart, who's, you know, of a different generation, and hear her understanding of forgiveness. So it was important for me to have those, because those generational understandings of forgiveness are so interesting and so fascinating in our own families, but also just in general.
And I love what you said too about how, you know, when you even just almost step outside of yourself and have conversations of, well, how would this other person's life be different if they had forgiven, or if they hadn't? And sometimes I think that could be such a great tool for every person listening to, just in our own lives, to think about it that way as well, and realize like, oh, maybe I need to do, to do it myself. Do it myself. So, okay, a couple quick audience questions, and you know, some of these you've already answered. The very first one, though, is just, Katherine, why is it so important to forgive?
Well, I think, again, that's just so individually, such a thing that's depending on every single person's situation. But I would just say that the common theme of why it's important to forgive is to just give yourself that freedom, give yourself that gift of freedom, that gift of no longer carrying around something terrible that happened to you, whether it was yesterday or 15 years ago or 60 years ago. Being able to give yourself the freedom from that pain, from that sadness, from that betrayal, that heartbreak, is such an incredible thing, an incredible act of self-love. And I think we're always looking for, especially in today's world, a little bit more love and more kindness and empathy and compassion, and giving yourself that gift is at the top of that list, I think.
Yeah, that's so good. And, you know, I think I was going to mention this earlier, but just, you know, the timeliness as well, of right now. I think coming out of this tough year, a lot of families are going to have to do a lot of forgiving as well. Just there's been a lot of things that are so unexpected that have divided families. And from political things to the pandemic to things where you never thought that, you know, people would be so divided. And so I think it's going to be your book right now. It's always needed, but right now, I mean, after the last 15 months, I think it's going to just do even that much more good. So, okay, the next question. Katherine, can you share with us an example from your life about a time when you had to forgive someone or have them forgive you?
Yeah, I mean, the one that I talk about in the book that really launched me into this curiosity around the topic of forgiveness was a huge falling out that I had with my best friend. And it was interesting because when I was experiencing that, I would talk to a lot of people about, you know, it sounds so trivial to have this falling out with your best friend. And it just, especially compared to the stories that are in this book, it sounds like something that's so simple and easy. And when I started talking to people about my experience, I really realized how common friendship fallouts really are, and how common betrayal is for a lot of people, and heartbreak, and the ending of a friendship or a relationship that you thought would last forever. How challenging that really is, and how so many of us have experienced that, or will experience it, and that it is something that we still don't really talk that much about. And I was so interested in that as well. Is like, why, you know, I know so many women who've had friendship fallouts with these things that I always call history friendships, which is like, you know, a friendship that you've had your whole life that you think is going to be with you until the end of time. And all of a sudden it's not. And so many women that I talk to, and men, but it seemed mostly women, that have also had very similar situations of fallouts with best friends, and how devastating that can be. And the forgiveness journey that comes there as well. And so that was really probably the most important and one of the biggest forgiveness situations for me, that caused me to have an interest in the topic of forgiveness, and also to write this book and to learn more about it. Because I would talk to someone, or I would talk to someone about my experience, and they would say, oh, that same thing happened to me. And this is how I'm dealing with it. And so I just love being able to hear people's journeys and experiences and learn from them, and also just continue my exploration and my growth around the topic of forgiveness.
You know, I was thinking there's a lot of really, really powerful and diverse stories, as you mentioned, and in the book. And, you know, I was thinking about forgiveness. I think also so many of the lessons in the book can be applied to like really small, simple things every day that people are dealing with. Like a random hater online says something, and it's like, if you can actually just forgive them, like sometimes I'll just pray for them. But it's like, it helps you just instantly. You know what I mean? It's like, these are tools that are applicable to big things, but also to like our daily things too, which I think is
for sure. I mean, I think like, especially when it comes to, you know, like things like social media and people who, you know, say nasty things. I always try to think of myself, what would have happened in that person's life or caused them to come up with something so mean and unkind. And then, wow, that must have been really painful that they would be able to say something like that, and to have compassion and empathy for them. And I don't even know them, but definitely not wanting to take a negative or hateful comment that was made about me or to a friend or a family member. I don't want to take that energy and carry it around with me in my day or my life. And it's obviously easier said than done a lot of the time, especially if you're a protective person like myself. But it is important to keep in mind that, you know, that the world is a very challenging place, and it's a beautiful, amazing place as well. And a lot of people are also hurting and struggling, and causes people to say mean or unkind things. And all we can do is pray for them, as you were saying, and also just have compassion, empathy, and wish them well.
Yeah. So good. And then you keep your power and you're free.
Exactly.
Because it's hard. Free from it. A lot of people, you know, like they're on Zoom for their jobs for the first time. They never wanted to be. They're on social media for their roles or their companies or their dreams. And it's new to them. And they're new to seeing haters and to seeing. And it's for a lot of people, it's such a challenge. And I think just It's so powerful what you just said, having that perspective around it, just so
Yeah.
it doesn't stick to you. Okay. Next question. Katherine, is there anything that is impossible to forgive? It's a question from the audience.
So I also got that question a lot just in my research with forgiveness and leading up to the book coming out last year and just in this past year. And there were plenty of times where people would come and say to me, you know, what happened to me is unforgivable. And I just simply cannot think of practicing forgiveness. And I always respond to that by saying, I totally understand that. And that is so valid and so okay. I'm never someone who is going to tell someone that they should forgive, that they should hurry up and forgive, or that they should even think about forgiveness, because again, that's so up to you and up to your personal decision. And also, again, I'm not an expert on forgiveness at all. I've just written a book on it and done a podcast on it and have done discussions on it and have learned about the topic more, and learned enough to know that it is giving yourself a gift of freedom. But I also know that there are plenty of situations and people who have experienced, you know, unforgivable acts that they don't consider to be forgivable. And I would say that I totally understand that, and that's okay. So I think that's important for people to know that there are, for plenty of people, there are things that are unforgivable, and that's okay.
And that's their own journey, right? To
Exactly.
decide.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Katherine, how does forgiveness heal the person who is doing the forgiving?
I think just by giving themselves this gift of freedom, that's the greatest gift that you can give yourself. And, you know, the ripple effect that being able to practice forgiveness has on those around you is also really incredible. I think you'll see it in this, in my book, by reading people's stories and just seeing that, you know, if you look at someone like Ron Hall, being able to see that his wife giving him the gift of forgiveness and choosing to forgive him for you know, straying outside their marriage has led and catapulted a whole movement that he was able to do with his wife to make a better community and better homes for homeless people and change the world in their way, and to see the effect that, you know, his wife's decision to forgive, the impact that it has had on so many lives is remarkable. And had she chosen to not do that, you know, none of those people's lives would have been helped by the shelters that they built, by the movements that they had created, the lives that they touched. So I think you really see in this book how the power to forgive is a powerful one, and it's also one that will have an effect on people around you, in your family, in your life, in your community. And you don't really know the full ripple effect that it will have right away, but it is a really positive and beautiful one. And you see in this book what kind of ripple effect it really can have on people.
That was one of my big takeaways actually from the book. And it's in a couple different stories, and that ripple effect, and realizing that, you know, in the story you just mentioned, he would have made totally different choices also had he not felt he was forgiven, right?
Yes.
And that, when I was like, oh wow, it's very powerful, and it just, and that same story just applies in so many different types of relationships and the same lessons, you know what I mean? And I think this is so good. So okay, let's see, Katherine, how does faith play a role in your journey of forgiveness?
Well, as I was mentioning before, faith is a huge theme in this book, and it's a really big theme in a lot of people's experiences and journeys with forgiveness and their struggles with forgiveness. I grew up Catholic and going to church, and still do, still go to church, and you know, faith is a huge part of my life and my family's life, and having that being a part of my life has definitely helped my understanding and my ability to practice forgiveness. Because I think when you have the ability to believe in a higher power or something bigger than yourself and bigger than what we're doing every single day, that it does help in your struggles and in your times of having heartbreak or heartache or sadness. To have that faith to lean on in those moments is so important and so crucial, and has been such a huge part of my life. And I know it's been a huge part of, you know, a lot of the people that I talk to for this book's lives, and also has been a huge theme when it comes to getting a better understanding of what the role of forgiveness means to them. And it certainly has been in my life. Faith has just been such a huge part of my life and continues to be. And I feel really grateful that my parents had that be a really big part of my childhood upbringing. And it's something that I definitely want to pass on to my daughter.
Well, thank you. Before we turn it back over to Christina, is there anything else that I didn't ask you or that you want to share with everyone who's here? I know so many people are excited to get your book in their hands for the first time, and just
thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I think you did an incredible job. And I'm so grateful to have had this conversation with you and to have you take the time to do this. I know you're super, super busy, and I'm so excited for your book as well. Everybody should go out and get that book, and you're doing such incredible work. So thank you for doing this amazing interview. I'm so grateful.
Wow, I am so grateful. And I have to say, so normally I do because we're both in the middle of book launches, but I took my book down behind me and I put this one up. But they're together, so they look really good together. Believe it, and the gift of forgiveness. But I had to match your book tonight.
So exciting!
I had to match.
Thank you.
And,
you did.
And I'm just, I just want to say thank you to you for all the goodness you put out into the world every single day, not just through your books, but through sharing your heart, your soul, everything you're doing online, everything you're doing now with EDA. So good.
Thank you.
And I just want to say thank you so much for having this conversation as well. And we'll bring Christina back on, and thanks to Books and Books as well for hosting this.
Yes.
What a beautiful conversation. Thank you. It's so inspiring. I love the fact that you're a student of forgiveness. I really especially can relate to that. And the whole idea of like freeing yourself is a really beautiful idea, because it turns everything upside down. It's not so much about the other person, but it's also about, growth, inner growth. And so thank you so much. Thank you for joining us in our little virtual bookshop. I hope that we're going to get to see you both in person sometime soon in Miami. Maybe Miami Book Fair in late November, perhaps both of you with your books. But anyway, again, thank you. Thank you to viewers watching from everywhere. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for your support. Your books are on the way to you in the mail already. So enjoy them. Keep reading. And good night. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Bye.